I will have one reflection before I will open up for questions, and I see that the time is running out. But it's kind of interesting to see that it seems like Australia and Israel both started with design independently, and both came to United States and influenced them, and it grew. I see that both Denmark, Canada picked up this slightly from United States, it seems like, but have their own new version because they're not following the same idea totally, and it is big difference. Because as I remember, both Simon Nave and Alex Ryan went to Booz Allen and was part of making that SAMS course that has influenced a lot of design in United States and Canada and Denmark, as we didn't have here today. I will open up. Major, you had a question?
Or thank you. So, Ofra, great presentation as always. We had this discussion before. You typically, for the military, IDF, teach systems theory, design, SOD to the generals. Is any of that education being taught at the intermediate level at the major or your staff college? Over.
The National Defense College, which is under the same commander, is suffering from that schizophrenia because you have at the National Defense College, you have colonels or lieutenant colonels and their counterparts, which, as Shimon says, they're the hardest ones to teach design because they're the peak of the tactical, right, ascendance. So for them, they know everything. And design is about learning how much you don't know. So that's it. It's not, they're using design in the National Defense College. And I think how they're trying to camouflage it is by doing the agnostic thing. So they'll bring all these horizons, simulations, and design. And they're teaching design like a methodology. We're not teaching design in the National Defense College. They brought someone else to do it. So it's, I don't think it's working, but I think that's why they're doing it there because they cannot ignore it, but they're not doing it like we're doing it. In the Command and Staff College, they've tried to bring design. Even we were part of it in the, again, late 90s and beginning of 2000s. It didn't work. Not because they're not smart enough, because, again, they're tacticians. They're like, what do you want from us? So we were trying to do other stuff with that, to bring them as planners at the end of the design exercise and show them the product and to have them think about the design product from the place of the planners or the tacticians who are going to see that design product. But that takes too much coordination, so that's not working as well. So straight answer, we're the only ones teaching design. Are other people doing it, again, independently or because they want to or using some part of it? Probably so. Thomas, just we take the opportunity, Australia. Alex Ryan was exposed to design through Shimon Ave at SAMS.
Yeah.
And Shimon Ave has been in Australia in the late 90s. And I think that's the first time that he spoke. He was there for 2 weeks. He came to do keynotes. That was the first time he brought operational art and design to Australia. That was in the late 90s sometime. So yes, I think a lot of it was around his personal connections. I mean, he was in the RCDS, he met a lot of people, and then he was also flying over. So it was a lot around before it became a formality that people started taking after.
Okay, thank you, Ofra.
Any other reflections? I see that the time is about when the meeting should end. So I will just... Yeah, of course.
If I may. And it's probably not one we want to answer now because we could spend all day on it. But if design thinking and its variations are so good at solving complex problems, why can't we crack the code ourselves on getting it into the mainstream education systems at the General Staff College kind of level, as opposed to the SAMS, SAWS, whatever, who obviously are picking up on it, noting that Canada sounds like they're the only ones who are actually including it as a compulsory component of the mainstream course, from what I can gather. Why can't we do it if we're promoting a product which is supposedly so good and solves complex problems, yet we can't crack our own problem?
Well, I think from my vantage point, right, it depends on the director of that particular college and the dean, right? And if the director is all bought in on design and systems theory and systems thinking, then it will be added. Then he'll just tell the dean, like, hey, put this in the curriculum. If the director, I'm talking about a military uniform, colonel, is not kind of squashing on systems theory, systems thinking, design, then it's not necessarily added in the curriculum. And like I said before, for U.S. military, the joint staff kind of sets the learning outcomes. And if there's no systems thinking, systems theory, design, learning outcome from the joint staff telling all the, staff colleges to put, then it's up to that director. And I don't know. I mean, I can see really easy, you can infiltrate design in your curriculum by just, talk about systems thinking and a little systems theory. And if you start that at the first academic part of the academic year, that could be touched on throughout the core curriculum through your military history studies or through your security studies. That could be infiltrated in as a learning outcome for that particular lesson. But it's to me, it's director and dean dependent.
And we have the same problem in Australia. So but a lot of these people are products of a traditional linear Taylorism type approach where they like quantitative data, they like decisive action and really kinetic effects, and they want to have decisive movement, and they want to have all those firm briefs from young thrusting army officers who are trying to impress the generals, and they use all the right words, and it's all templated and it looks Gucci, but it lacks the divergent thinking of understanding the whole problem and thinking outside the box, because they're not rewarded for that. They're rewarded for having a strong presence in the brief. And so we go around the boy, same as you. Every so often we'll get an inspired senior officer. We had an acting commander earlier this year, right up until the nuclear submarine deal, and our commander got taken out, whatever, and we had the acting one, and we go into briefing because we'd lined up this brief with the commander, the 2-star, and it was like, how are we going to weave in design thinking into the main course? And he goes, well, is it in doctrine? Because if it's not in doctrine, we're not allowed to teach it. And we're like, well, how does the schoolhouse educate the system? And so we go to the doctrine people and they go, oh, no, we can't put it in because it's got to be battle proven. It's got to be tested in combat. And you can't put things in doctrine unless it's been tested. And so we end up in the circular argument where the college is saying, oh, we can't teach it because it's not in doctrine. And doctrine people are saying, well, we can't teach it because we haven't used it in combat. But the reason they're not using it in combat is because we can't teach anyone it, so nobody gets to know about it, and we just kind of run around in circles. So anyway, I'll shut up.
I would say, for United States purposes, 20 years in Afghanistan, 15 years in Vietnam.
You know that, I know that, but
that's your proof.
And we write it, we put it in blogs, we put it in journal articles, and we try to get the message above the parapet, but it just falls on deaf ears when we've got Luddites who are iron colonels in the frozen middle who are risk averse because they're worried about up and out promotions and they just want steady as she goes.
I can just offer a quick observation. I find it always very interesting that the greatest time that we have fear of trying new things is during peacetime, when the stakes are at the lowest, and it's only when it's in conflict that we are scrambling to figure out what's working because the doctrine isn't able to handle it anymore and people are dying, and that's when we're throwing everything at the kitchen sink at the problem and coming up with new solutions. It's an interesting paradigm.
Yeah. And I guess one other thing, which, all respect to Oprah, but the people who push back on it in our senior leadership go and point to the 2006 Lebanon-Hezbollah conflict and say, look, see, it didn't work. For the same reason, anyone who doesn't want to go down the integration and joint services path, they go, oh, look, Canada tried it and it failed. And that's their get out of jail free card. And it's like shut down the conversation, and they won't entertain any more logical arguments or debate. They're just like, oh, look, we've got an example, and that's our reason for not talking about it anymore. Anyway, again, I'll shut up. Thanks, Canada. Thanks, Israel.
Thank you for all the comments. We are on overtime, so I wouldn't hold anyone anymore here. I guess I didn't hold you at any point, but I guess this is what comes to evolutionary or revolutionary development, because of course a lot of things are different now than it was 20, 30, 40 years back. But thank you all for coming here and sharing. I will certainly use some of this in my studies.